Millionaire's mistress seduces him while his pregnant wife is away, never expected her sudden return. In a glittering penthouse high above the bustling city, a quiet secret threatens to shatter the lives of those who believe they have everything. Damon Carlyle, charismatic millionaire and beloved philanthropist, appears to have the perfect marriage with his radiant, pregnant wife, Elizabeth. But when Elizabeth travels abroad to safeguard her health, a seductive stranger seizes the opportunity to stake her claim. Camila Monroe, beguiling and relentless, slips into Damon's world with promises of thrilling passion. Little do they know, Elizabeth's sudden and unexpected return will unearth every hidden desire and betrayal, setting off a powder keg of drama neither mistress nor husband can escape. Elizabeth Carlyle had grown up in a serene neighborhood in Boston, nurtured by her loving parents who believed in honesty, compassion, and loyalty. All her life, she dreamed of building a family home that radiated warmth and stability, something she found lacking in her college relationships. So when she met Damon Carlyle, an up-and-coming tech entrepreneur, his confidence and devotion seemed to promise everything she'd ever wanted. They married in a lavish ceremony attended by business elites, socialites, and close friends. Damon's star soared as he founded Carlyle Innovations, a company devoted to pioneering smart home technologies. Over time, Damon's net worth skyrocketed, and soon enough, the couple found themselves the owners of a penthouse on Fifth Avenue, frequent guests at elite galas, and philanthropic darlings of the high society pages. But for Elizabeth, the highlights were simpler, their quiet nights watching movies, Damon's morning kisses over breakfast, and eventually the joyful discovery that she was pregnant with their first child. Having struggled with minor health issues early in her pregnancy, Elizabeth's doctor suggested a less stressful environment for her second trimester, ideally away from the relentless swirl of New York City. That was how Elizabeth found herself on a plane to Switzerland, traveling to stay with her longtime friend Harriet Brown, a holistic wellness specialist with a private clinic near the Alps. The plan was for Elizabeth to spend a few peaceful weeks abroad, focusing on her health and preparing for the baby, while Damon continued running Carlyle Innovations from home. Before leaving, Elizabeth felt a twinge of doubt. Damon had grown a bit distant, nothing overt, just a subtle distraction in his eyes sometimes, as though a portion of his mind was forever tethered to the next big deal or the next rung on the social ladder. But when she looked into his eyes on the day of her departure, he seemed determined to allay her worries. "I'll join you as soon as I can," Damon said, holding her hand at the airport terminal. "Things are hectic at work, and we're about to close a monumental contract, but I'll be there in a heartbeat if you need me." Elizabeth tried to ignore the uneasy quiver in her stomach. She kissed him goodbye, focusing on the bigger picture. They had a child on the way, and Damon's drive had always been part of what she loved about him. Yet that night in Switzerland, as Elizabeth settled into the tranquil bedroom Harriet prepared for her, she couldn't push away the creeping sense that Damon's calm assurance masked something unsaid. She brushed it off as anxiety, the natural worry of a pregnant woman grappling with change. After all, she had never doubted Damon's commitment before. Little did she know, the stage was already being set for a heartbreak she'd never have thought possible. Far across the ocean, on the top floor of their Manhattan penthouse, her husband was about to meet a woman who would exploit every vulnerability left by Elizabeth's absence and unravel the life Elizabeth had so carefully built. The day Elizabeth boarded her plane, Damon found himself in a swirl of back-to-back meetings at Carlyle Innovations. Negotiations for a major government contract with the city of New York consumed his every waking minute. His executive assistant, Gina Hall, had never seen him so frenetic, always rushing from one call to the next. When he finally wrapped up the day, Damon felt an odd emptiness upon returning to the penthouse. Elizabeth's usual presence, her laughter, her affectionate glances, her gentle reminders to unplug, was painfully missing. The place felt too quiet, save for the hum of air conditioning and the distant rumble of city traffic. After a late dinner of reheated leftovers, Damon changed into casual attire, planning to review documents for the next day's negotiations. But a single glass of whiskey turned into 2, then 3. By midnight, he sat in the dimly lit living room, laptop open but neglected, his mind drifting. A swirl of longing and restlessness found its way into his chest. He missed Elizabeth's reassuring presence, but at the same time, a small, reckless part of him savored the unstructured freedom of her absence. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Damon's first thought was that it might be Gina with urgent papers, but when he checked the security camera on his phone, the screen displayed a woman with sleek auburn hair and smoky eyes. She wore a stylish coat and clutched a small folder. He recognized her, Camila Monroe. Camila was a consultant who had been introduced to him by a mutual acquaintance at a corporate gala the previous month. A freelance brand strategist, she had offered her services to polish Carlyle Innovations' image. They'd exchanged business cards, but Damon hadn't thought much of it until now. Curious, he buzzed her up. She stepped into the penthouse with an assured confidence, shedding her coat to reveal a fitted black dress. "I hope I'm not intruding," Camila said, an apologetic smile on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I heard you might be finalizing a big contract, and I have some branding ideas I think you'll love. Thought I'd catch you before your schedule got any busier." Damon found himself momentarily speechless. He was aware of the subtle tension in her posture, the lingering gaze she cast around the penthouse. She set down the folder on the marble kitchen island, explaining how a rebranding campaign might leverage the upcoming contract's publicity. He listened, sipping whiskey, mind still hazy from the emptiness that had hovered around him all evening. When she finished outlining her pitch, he cleared his throat. "Your timing is unexpected," he said, forcing a chuckle. "But I appreciate the initiative." Camilla's smile deepened, revealing perfect teeth. "I believe in seizing opportunities," she replied, leaning closer than necessary, "and I wanted to ensure my ideas weren't lost in the shuffle." Though Damon recognized the flicker of attraction in her eyes, he told himself it was harmless. Camila was an ambitious business contact, not a threat. So what if she arrived unannounced, late at night? The best deals often arose from after-hours spontaneity. Yet as the conversation wore on, the lines between professionalism and personal intrigue began to blur. Camila exuded a confidence laced with flirtation, and Damon, disarmed by Elizabeth's absence and the whiskey's heat, found himself leaning in. He told himself it was just conversation, nothing more. But beneath that veneer, a dangerous spark was being lit, one that would soon threaten everything he held dear. Camila Monroe understood the art of subtle seduction better than most. Raised in a modest home in upstate New York, she learned early on that ambition and determination could open doors. Money could not. By the time she was 30, she had forged a path as a high-end consultant, working with tech moguls and celebrity brands. But her real talent lay in reading people's vulnerabilities. That night in Damon's penthouse, she sensed a gap, the lonely hush left by his pregnant wife's absence, and exploited it. She engaged him in a spirited debate about brand perception, occasionally touching his arm to emphasize a point, letting her laughter linger just enough to stir a flicker of male pride. Soon, Damon found himself inviting her to sit on the plush living room couch while he fetched fresh glasses from the bar. She praised his achievements, complimenting the penthouse's design, the city skyline view, and the personal touches that suggested he was more than just a stoic businessman. At each gentle nudge, Damon relaxed further, lulled by her confidence and the ambient glow of the city lights. When midnight gave way to 1 in the morning, Camila made a show of checking her watch. "I've kept you too long," she said, rising with a feigned sense of propriety. "We can continue discussing this tomorrow or whenever you're free. Let's finalize a plan to get your brand exactly where it needs to be." Damon walked her to the elevator, heart still drumming with the mix of whiskey and the intangible thrill of their conversation. Before stepping inside, Camila offered him a slow smile. "I'll be in touch," she promised. "There's so much more we can do together." As the elevator doors slid closed, Damon stood there, a cocktail of guilt and excitement swirling within him. He told himself it was perfectly normal to enjoy the company of a driven professional contact. But deep down, he couldn't deny how easily her presence had soothed his loneliness more than it should have. The next day arrived too quickly. Damon woke with a dull headache and a sense of unease. In the harsh light of morning, he resolved to keep things strictly professional with Camila. He was a married man, soon to be a father, and that meant boundaries. With Elizabeth away, he had to be doubly careful not to invite complications into their lives. But Camila was relentless. 2 days later, she scheduled a meeting at his office, bringing a series of polished proposals. Gina Hall, Damon's assistant, politely offered her coffee, but Camila refused with a breezy laugh. "I prefer a quiet lunch with Damon. If he's free, discussing creative strategies in a relaxed environment is always better," she told Gina with that warm, disarming smile. Caught between his responsibilities and a strangely growing sense of camaraderie with Camila, Damon accepted. Over an upscale lunch at Le Rivage, they hammered out ideas for a futuristic branding campaign to coincide with Carlyle Innovations' potential government contract. Camilla's arguments were persuasive, her pitch deck immaculate, but it was her unwavering attention, her eyes locked on Damon, her voice layering praise with challenge that enthralled him. By dessert, they were bantering about everything from public relations to personal passions. Camila artfully steered the conversation away from Elizabeth, focusing on Damon's ambitions, dreams, even his occasional fears about fatherhood. She listened intently, offering just enough personal anecdotes to weave a sense of intimacy. And Damon, lulled by her charm, found it increasingly difficult to maintain that mental barrier he'd promised himself. He reminded himself that Elizabeth was the woman he loved, the one carrying his child, but each time Camila leaned forward with genuine interest shining in her eyes, the lines began to blur once more. Elizabeth's days in Switzerland unfolded with a serene routine: morning yoga sessions with Harriet, leisurely walks around the mountainous trails, and prenatal checkups at the clinic. The fresh alpine air helped soothe her body, and for a while she reveled in the calm. Yet her mind never fully settled. She called Damon regularly, hoping to bridge the distance through shared anecdotes and updates about each other's days. Initially, he answered with warmth, detailing the challenges at Carlyle Innovations and claiming to miss her presence in their empty penthouse. But over time, Elizabeth picked up on subtle shifts. He became more curt, calls were hurried, and messages often went unanswered for hours. Harriet noticed Elizabeth's restless fidgeting after one particularly brief phone call. "Is Damon okay?" Harriet asked softly, handing Elizabeth a steaming mug of herbal tea. "You seem worried." Elizabeth forced a smile, wrapping her hands around the cup. "He's just busy," she replied. "That new contract is massive, and I know him when he's in work mode. Everything else fades into the background." Harriet studied her friend's face, lines of concern deepening. "Busy is one thing, but shutting you out is another," she said. "Don't dismiss your instincts if something feels off." Elizabeth sighed. She trusted Damon, but Harriet's words rattled her. The next few nights, she texted more frequently, her messages a mix of support and gentle reminders that she was there for him. His replies became sporadic: late meeting, call you tomorrow, or swamped at work, love you. By the fifth day of these short, impersonal texts, Elizabeth's anxiety grew. She decided to set aside her pride and phone Damon late in his evening, knowing he'd be at home if he truly was done with the day's hustle. He picked up on the third ring, sounding slightly breathless. "Hey, Liz," he managed. Elizabeth sat up, heart racing. "Sorry if I woke you," she began. "Are you okay?" A brief pause crackled through the line. "Yeah, just was heading to bed," Damon said, voice oddly tense. In the background, Elizabeth thought she heard the faint clink of glass, but she couldn't be certain. Forcing a light laugh, she tried to keep her voice steady. "Are you wearing yourself out again?" A beat of silence. Then he exhaled. "Yeah, it's just constant, you know? Meetings, calls. I can't wait until you're back. How are you feeling? Is the baby okay?" She relaxed slightly at his mention of the baby. "Everything's fine here. The doctor says I'm in good shape. But I miss you. Are you sure you're all right?" Damon's answer was immediate. "I'm fine, I promise. The deal is at a critical juncture, so my mind is all over the place. Don't worry about me. Focus on your health, okay?" Elizabeth didn't push further, not wanting to appear clingy or paranoid. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, and then Damon ended the call, claiming exhaustion. But as Elizabeth laid back against the pillows, an unsettled feeling pooled in her stomach. He's too guarded, too elusive, she thought. Her instincts whispered that something was amiss. She stroked her baby bump, trying to reassure herself that Damon was simply overwhelmed. Still, a small voice inside her wondered if Harriet was right, if there was more to his distant behavior than the demands of business. She resolved to speak to Damon again soon, more openly, maybe even suggest an earlier return if her health allowed it. But little did she know that across the ocean, an entirely different scenario was unfolding, a scenario fueled by late-night whispers, fleeting touches, and a blossoming attraction Damon had tried and failed to contain. Camilla's infiltration into Damon's life soon went beyond after-work meetings and brand strategy lunches. She found excuses to join him for business dinners, offering to help refine pitch materials with a feminine touch that might appeal to the city officials. Damon, caught between pride in her marketing savvy and the thrill of her attention, agreed time and again. One night, Gina Hall, ever vigilant, grew wary of Camilla's presence. She cornered Damon after a staff meeting, lowering her voice so others wouldn't hear. "Mr. Carlyle," she said, eyes full of concern, "is everything all right at home? With Mrs. Carlyle away?" Damon bristled at the question. "It's fine, Gina. Why do you ask?" Gina hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "Camilla, she's around a lot lately, sir. And sometimes it doesn't feel strictly about business. I'm worried about your reputation." A flash of guilt and annoyance flickered in Damon's chest. He forced a tight smile. "I appreciate your concern, but it's under control. She's vital to the brand campaign right now." Gina nodded, stepping back. "I understand. Just be careful, sir." Later that evening, Damon planned to head straight home after a demanding day, but when he stepped outside his office, he found Camilla waiting in the lobby, a coy smile on her lips. "I wanted to run some last-minute ideas by you," she said in a purr. "Maybe over dinner." He hesitated, mind replaying Gina's warning. Then he remembered Elizabeth's lonely voice on the phone. He should probably just go home. But Camilla's unwavering gaze hooked him again. A flicker of excitement overcame his caution, and he relented, telling himself it was strictly about work. They ended up at a modern Japanese restaurant, seated in a private alcove. Over delicately presented sushi and sake, Camilla presented polished slides on her tablet. But as the meal wore on, the conversation drifted from corporate talk to personal anecdotes, her childhood dreams, his hopes for fatherhood, her fascination with travel, and his love of architecture. Marriage changes people, Camila mused at one point, swirling sake in her cup. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. How has it changed you, Damon? He paused, uncomfortably aware that Elizabeth's name was rarely spoken in Camilla's presence. It's made me more mindful of responsibility, he said carefully. And with the baby on the way, I want to provide a stable life, Camila nodded, leaning forward. Her perfume was subtle yet alluring, reminiscent of jasmine. It's admirable, but stability can also become a cage, can't it? You have all these big dreams, and sometimes marriage makes you choose caution over ambition. Something in her words stirred Damon's restlessness. Elizabeth supports my ambition, he insisted. She's always been proud of what I do. Camila smiled, feigning innocence. Oh, of course, I'm not implying otherwise. But I understand the pressure you're under. It's nice to have an outlet to remember you're not just a husband or father to be, but also a man with his own desires and goals. The conversation felt like a slow dance, each step drawing them closer to a line Damon had never intended to cross. By the time they finished their meal, it was nearly midnight again. Instead of heading separate ways, Camila casually suggested they share a nightcap at his penthouse to finalize a few slides. A swirl of alarm, tinged with exhilaration, tightened Damon's chest. He knew exactly what it would look like. His mind wavered between caution and a yearning he couldn't fully deny. At last he gave a curt nod, telling himself it was just one drink, one final review of strategy. Nothing more, he thought. I'm in control. But in truth, the unspoken tension between them was a spark waiting for a single gust of wind to blaze into a wildfire. And so they climbed into his chauffeured car, heading toward the penthouse that Elizabeth once filled with her bright laughter. The same penthouse that now stood vulnerable to Camilla's clandestine charms. They arrived at the penthouse in a hush. Damon's footsteps echoed against the polished marble floor, heart pounding with a conflict he tried to suppress. Camila removed her coat, draping it over the back of a chair, revealing a sleek black dress that framed her figure. He led her to the living area, flipping on a lamp that bathed the space in a soft, warm glow. Camila admired the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights twinkling like distant stars. Damon fetched a bottle of his favorite bourbon, carefully pouring 2 glasses. They sipped in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. Then Camila opened her tablet, bringing up slides about brand partnerships. She perched on the edge of the couch, patting the cushion next to her for Damon to join. He sat, maintaining a deliberate half-foot of space between them. Their conversation began professionally enough, discussing marketing angles, rollout timelines, press releases. But as the minutes ticked by, her voice turned softer, her posture leaned closer, and her hand brushed his arm once, twice. Finally, Damon set down his glass. "I think we've covered everything," he said, clearing his throat. "It's late." Camila didn't move. Her gaze locked onto his, a challenge simmering in her eyes. "It is late, but you're not rushing to bed, are you?" He glanced away, ignoring the swirl of heat rising in his chest. "Actually, She placed a hand on his thigh, a gesture that sent a jolt of alarm through him. "Damon, you work so hard, and you're so alone here." Her voice was a hushed entreaty. "Don't you ever want to feel free?" He stiffened. Every rational thought urged him to push her hand away, to remind her he was married. And yet, for all his inner discipline, a part of him was drawn to her audacity, the sense that she was offering a thrill he had unconsciously craved. He thought of Elizabeth, gentle and trusting, an ocean away in a Swiss clinic. Guilt jabbed at him, but his body yearned for something immediate, something dangerously alive. "It's just a moment," Camila whispered, leaning in. "A moment nobody else needs to know about." Time seemed to stretch. Damon's heart hammered, the noise of his conscience clashing with a sudden, reckless desire. Camilla's lips hovered inches from his, her breath warm and inviting. Just one kiss, the voice of temptation murmured. Just a taste of something new. He didn't remember exactly who moved first. A spark flickered, and suddenly they were kissing, tentative at first, then hungry. Damon's mind screamed warnings, but the thrill drowned them out. Camila pressed closer, and in that heated exchange, he felt every barrier crumble. Somewhere, far from the surface of this moment, Damon knew he was crossing a point of no return. But he was powerless to resist the rush of seduction. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Camilla's eyes glowed with triumph. She slid her arms around his neck, and he didn't stop her. Later, as the city drifted toward dawn, Damon lay awake, pulse still racing. Camila slept beside him in Elizabeth's bed. Shame coiled in his stomach, but the damage was done. With the hush of night as witness, the line between loyalty and betrayal had been shattered, setting the stage for an unraveling that neither he nor Camila could control. The next morning, Damon awoke to a rush of guilt that struck him like a physical blow. He slipped out of bed before Camila stirred, hurrying to the bathroom. Staring at his reflection in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Elizabeth's face flashed through his mind, the woman who had built a life with him, who was carrying his child. He thought of her gentle laughter, the unwavering trust in her eyes. What have I done? He showered quickly, unable to shake the sour feeling that clung to him. When he emerged, he found Camila in the living room, dressed in last night's clothes. Scrolling through her phone with a cat-like satisfaction, she glanced up with a languid smile. "Morning," she purred. "I ordered coffee and pastries from the cafe downstairs. I figured we might talk strategy before heading into the office." He swallowed hard, mind reeling with the enormity of their betrayal, yet part of him still throbbed with the memory of the night's passion. Clearing his throat, he forced a polite nod. "Fine. But let's keep this quiet, all right?" Camilla's eyes glittered. "Of course, I'm not looking to cause trouble for you. But we'll be working closely, Damon. Is that what you want?" He hesitated, aware that ending whatever this was would be the wisest choice. Still, he couldn't bring himself to fully cut ties. Maybe it was the guilt that paralyzed him, or perhaps a lingering spark of forbidden attraction. Finally, he answered stiffly, "Let's focus on the contract. That's our priority." She smirked as if she knew how easily she could reignite the flame, but she let him maintain his pretenses for now. Throughout the day at Carlisle Innovations, Damon tried to bury himself in work. He avoided Gina's searching glances and sidestepped Camilla's pointed stares whenever they passed in the halls. Yet a swirl of unease followed him, tarnishing every victory. By late afternoon, Gina cornered him again, handing him documents that needed urgent review. "Mr. Carlisle," Elizabeth called. "She wanted to know if you have time to speak tonight." Damon's chest tightened. "Thanks," he said gruffly, taking the papers. I'll call her later." Gina nodded, concern flickering across her face. She waited a beat, then ventured softly, "I hope you're okay, sir." Mrs. Carlisle seemed worried. He mustered a tight smile. "I'm fine, Gina. Just busy." That night, he went home alone, telling Camila he needed to rest. Even so, his mind churned with the memory of their intimate betrayal. He avoided the master bedroom, choosing instead to lie on the living room couch. When Elizabeth called, he tried to sound normal, but she immediately sensed his distance. "Damon, are you sure everything's all right?" she asked softly. "I can't help but feel you're off." He swallowed, the lie catching in his throat. "Just exhausted," he murmured. "The contract is draining me." She sighed on the other end. "I understand. I'm doing better here. Harriet says I might be able to come home sooner if all continues smoothly." A bolt of panic shot through him. "That's good news," he said, voice faltering slightly. "But don't rush. Your health is paramount." He ended the call, heart hammering. The mere thought of Elizabeth returning suddenly, seeing him entangled in this sordid affair, filled him with dread. Yet he also felt a strange anticipation, a perverse sense of living on the edge that made him feel alive. Even as it threatened to destroy everything, Damon told himself this madness had to end. He would finalize the contract, sever ties with Camila, and beg Elizabeth's forgiveness somehow. But each promise he made to himself cracked under the weight of Camila's allure. He stood at the crossroads of reason and desire, edging ever closer to a catastrophe that no measure of careful planning could avert. As the days turned into a week, Damon juggled the high stakes of his professional life with the tangled secrets of his personal one. Camila continued her subtle campaign of flirtation, turning up at the penthouse sporadically, always with a flimsy business excuse. Despite his best intentions, Damon found himself unable to entirely push her away. Each stolen kiss or late-night rendezvous only deepened the emotional quicksand. All the while, guilt gnawed at him, manifested in restless nights and uneasy phone calls with Elizabeth, who unknowingly navigated her own anxieties thousands of miles away. Meanwhile, word of Damon's close collaboration with Camila began to trickle through the office grapevine. Gina overheard whispers of them dining alone at exclusive restaurants, or Camila leaving Damon's penthouse in the early morning. Though no one could confirm the truth, rumors swirled. Alarmed, Gina once again approached Damon in his office. "I don't mean to intrude on your personal affairs, Mr. Carlyle," she said, quietly, "but the team is talking. This is the sort of speculation that could harm your reputation and Carlyle Innovations." Damon pressed his fingers to his temples, feeling a migraine coming on. "I appreciate the warning," he said. "I'll handle it. Handle it before it spirals," Gina insisted. "And if you need help, maybe confide in someone who can offer guidance." He nodded brusquely, not daring to meet her eyes. Confide in someone? Who could he trust with this disgraceful secret? Certainly not Elizabeth, who remained blissfully unaware, nor Harriet, nor any of his business associates. He felt more isolated than ever, trapped in a cycle of desire and remorse. That evening, a storm blanketed Manhattan in heavy rain. Damon returned to the penthouse, determined to lock himself away from any possibility of seeing Camila. To his dismay, he found her sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, the lights dimmed to a sultry glow. "Who let you in?" he demanded, though his pulse quickened at the sight of her. She feigned a hurt expression. "Your doorman recognizes me. I told him we had urgent branding plans to finalize." He shook his head in frustration, but she rose gracefully, crossing the room to stand before him. "Are you going to throw me out?" she asked in a low voice, trailing her fingers along the lapel of his jacket. "Or are you glad to see me?" A thunderclap outside mirrored the turmoil in Damon's mind. "Camila, this is getting out of hand," he breathed. "People at the office are talking." "My wife," Camila pressed a manicured finger to his lips. "Shaish, don't talk about her right now." She leaned in, her perfume wrapping around his senses. "I know it's risky, but that's what makes it exciting, isn't it?" He wanted to protest, to forcibly remove her from his home, but her kiss silenced the last protests of reason. The storm outside raged, and inside so did the tempest of their entangled desires. Each lightning flash illuminated the lines of guilt etched on Damon's face, but he gave in again, sinking deeper into the madness that Camila cultivated. Hours later, as the storm eased, Damon stood by the window while Camila dressed to leave. He felt hollow, his reflection in the glass a man he hardly recognized. "This can't go on," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Camila strolled up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "It doesn't have to be forever," she cooed, "but while it lasts, let's not deny ourselves." Her words chilled him. He realized with mounting dread that the longer he entertained this affair, the harder it would be to extricate himself without catastrophe. And somewhere across the Atlantic, Elizabeth, his devoted, pregnant wife, was inching closer to returning home, blissfully ignorant of the betrayal unfolding in her absence. Switzerland offered Elizabeth a haven of crisp air and tranquil vistas, yet her heart remained unsettled. The closer her pregnancy approached the third trimester, the stronger her longing to be by Damon's side. Despite Harriet's assurances that all was well physically, Elizabeth couldn't shake the sense that something was amiss back home. She decided to speak with Harriet openly about her worries. One afternoon they sat on a terrace overlooking the snow-capped peaks, wrapped in blankets to ward off the autumn chill. Elizabeth sipped herbal tea, then glanced at Harriet. "I'm thinking of returning sooner," she confessed. "Damon keeps telling me he's busy, but I hear this tension in his voice." Harriet studied her friend's anxious face. "Your health is much better, and the baby is fine, right?" she asked. "If you feel compelled to go back, maybe that's your intuition guiding you." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "I don't want to be paranoid, but I can't ignore how distant he sounds. Normally, Damon would share every little detail, especially about a big contract. Now I get short updates, or he brushes off my calls altogether." Harriet sighed. "Men handle stress differently. But you also have good instincts. If you feel he's in trouble, emotional or otherwise, it might be time to trust your gut." Later that day, Elizabeth called Damon, determined to probe gently. The phone rang several times before he picked up, voice breathless. "Liz, hey, sorry, can't talk long. I'm in the middle of something." She tightened her grip on the phone. "I just wanted to let you know I'm planning to come home next week. The doctor here cleared me to travel safely. And Harriet says I'm in great shape, so there's no reason to stay." A beat of silence. Then Damon's tone wavered. That's sooner than we planned. Are you sure? Maybe you should enjoy the rest." Elizabeth frowned, her heart pounding. "I've rested enough. I miss you, Damon, and I want to be with you before the baby arrives. Is that a problem?" He forced a laugh that sounded hollow. "Of course not. It's just, the contract is at a critical stage. I'll be swamped, and I won't have much time to spend with you." She closed her eyes, uncertain why his words felt like a lie. "I understand. Still, I'd rather be near you, even if you're busy." They ended the call without much warmth, leaving Elizabeth more convinced than ever that something was wrong. Within 2 days, she had booked her flight, packed her belongings, and hugged Harriet goodbye. When Harriet walked her to the car, she pressed a slip of paper into Elizabeth's hand. "This is my contact if you ever need me to fly over for support," Harriet said seriously. "Promise you'll call if things get complicated." Elizabeth gave a grateful smile, though nerves danced in her stomach. "Thank you, Harriet. I hope I'm just overthinking." Yet as the car pulled away toward the airport, Elizabeth couldn't deny the creeping dread that whispered Damon had changed. She braced herself for the possibility that her homecoming would reveal truths far more unsettling than she was prepared for. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Damon slept fitfully in the master bedroom he once shared with Elizabeth, his dreams haunted by the image of her gentle smile colliding with Camilla's smouldering stare. The world he'd built on carefully curated appearances teetered precariously, awaiting the shockwave of Elizabeth's early return. It was nearly dusk when Elizabeth's flight touched down at JFK Airport. She stepped off the plane, heart pounding with both excitement and apprehension. The baby gave a little kick, as if sensing her emotional state. "We'll be all right," she whispered to herself, gently patting her stomach. "I just need to see Damon, talk this through." She had chosen not to alert him of her exact arrival time, thinking a spontaneous reunion might be a heartfelt surprise. She imagined him lighting up at the sight of her, whisking her into a gentle embrace. That comforting fantasy sustained her through baggage claim and the car ride home. However, upon stepping into the penthouse, she found only silence. No notes, no welcoming hug from Damon. The faint hum of the HVAC system was the sole greeting. Confused, Elizabeth called his phone, no answer. She left her luggage in the foyer, wandering through the rooms that felt strangely unfamiliar. In the master bedroom, she noticed subtle changes. A few extra pillows askew, the faintest hint of unfamiliar perfume. A prick of unease threaded through her. She sniffed the air again, realizing it wasn't a scent she recognized from her own collection. Perhaps a guest visited. Maybe it's Gina's or some colleagues. She tried to quell the flicker of suspicion. Scrolling through her messages, Elizabeth saw one from Damon earlier that day, referencing another late meeting with city officials. Maybe he's still at the office, she reasoned. Exhausted but unable to rest, she decided to head there herself. She wanted to see Damon's face. The moment he realized she was back. Half an hour later, Elizabeth stood in the gleaming lobby of Carlisle Innovations. A security guard recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Carlisle, we weren't expecting you." "Should I alert Mr. Carlisle?" She forced a smile. "That's all right, Mark. I'd like to surprise him. Is he still upstairs?" The guard's face shifted to mild uncertainty. He was, but he left about 20 minutes ago with Miss Monroe. Elizabeth's smile faltered. "Miss Monroe?" He nodded. "Yes, Miss Camila Monroe. She's a branding consultant. They've been working closely on the new city contract. They left together." A sudden hush seemed to envelop Elizabeth. Together? Did they say where they were going? The guard shrugged, oblivious to her growing discomfort. "Some restaurant, maybe?" They both seemed in a hurry. Elizabeth forced herself to remain composed, thanking the guard. She turned away, heart throbbing in her chest. She'd never heard of Camila Monroe before. Why would Damon be at dinner with a branding consultant so late, and so often that the security guard knew her by name? Elizabeth's phone beeped with a text from Harriet, just a friendly check-in. She ignored it, focusing on the swirl of emotions overtaking her. Something is definitely wrong. Determined to find answers, she pulled up Damon's last text, gleaning he was likely at a high-end restaurant near the City Hall district. She hailed a cab, adrenaline surging. Her mind churned with worst-case scenarios, but she clung to the hope that there was a benign explanation for all this. Damon wouldn't betray me. Not now, not when we're about to have a child. Yet the whisper of that foreign perfume lingered in her mind, and the guard's casual remark about Miss Monroe stung like a warning. She didn't know it yet, but the truth that awaited her that evening would confirm her deepest fears and ignite a confrontation that would tear the veneer off. Damon's carefully guarded secrets. Nightfall cloaked the upscale restaurant's exterior in glittering lights. Elizabeth stepped out of the cab, her heart pounding. She scanned the sidewalk for Damon's familiar silhouette, her nerves coiling tighter with each passing second. Through the window, she spotted him, seated at a corner table with a striking woman, presumably Camila Monroe, leaning close, smiling in a way that made Elizabeth's stomach churn. Elizabeth couldn't see Damon's expression clearly, but his posture hinted at intimacy rather than a simple business meeting. Summoning courage, she pushed open the restaurant's glass doors. The hostess approached, but Elizabeth silently walked past, eyes trained on that corner table. The moment she reached them, Damon turned, and the shock on his face spoke volumes. "Elizabeth?" he breathed, half rising from his seat. "What are you? You're back?" Camila glanced up with a slow, assessing blink. She didn't move, but Elizabeth sensed her coiled confidence like a panther suddenly aware of another predator. Elizabeth forced a tight smile. "Yes, I'm back. I wanted to surprise you." Her gaze shifted to Camila. "The first see I'm the one who's surprised, though." Damon stuttered. "Camila and we were just discussing branding strategies." Camila offered a smooth extension of her hand. "Camila Monroe, branding consultant," she said, voice dripping with polite civility. "Nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Carlisle." Elizabeth ignored the handshake, turning her attention to Damon. "I arrived at the penthouse, but you weren't there. Mark, the security guard at your office, Said you left with Miss Monroe. Damon swallowed, colour draining from his cheeks. Yes, we're finishing up some last-minute details for the city contract. Elizabeth, I can explain. Camila stood gracefully, brushing invisible crumbs from her sleek dress. I'll give you a moment, she said, picking up her purse. Before walking away, she flashed Damon a brief, cryptic smile. I'll see you tomorrow, Damon. We still have a few points to finalize. Elizabeth held herself rigid, resisting the urge to confront Camila right then and there. Once Camila left, Damon stepped closer, voice taut with panic. Liz, I should have told you we had a working dinner. Why didn't you let me know you were coming home early? She stared at him, tears threatening to spill. I wanted to surprise you, but clearly I'm the one who's blindsided. Damon glanced around the restaurant, painfully aware of curious gazes from nearby tables. Let's not do this here. Let's go home and talk. The mention of home sparked a fresh wave of anger in Elizabeth. Home, which smells of another woman's perfume. She forced her voice steady. Fine, but I want the truth, Damon. They said little during the tense ride back. In the penthouse, Elizabeth motioned for him to sit in the living room, flipping on all the lights as if to banish the shadows. She stood before him, arms crossed over her growing belly. What is going on, Damon? Who is Camila Monroe to you, really? She demanded, her eyes burning with hurt. Don't lie. I know something isn't right. He started to speak, faltered, then tried again. She's been helping with the brand campaign. We got close, too close, but it's just stress. It meant nothing. Elizabeth's heart clenched at his halting confession. You're telling me you betrayed me with a meaningless fling? He buried his face in his hands. I never meant for it to happen, Liz. It got out of control. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry. A sob threatened in Elizabeth's throat, but she forced it back. She glanced around, her gaze landing on the master bedroom door. The memory of that unfamiliar perfume pulled her mind into a spiral. It's not just once, is it? She's been here, while I was away, pregnant with your child. Damon couldn't meet her eyes. Yes, he rasped. I don't know what to say, except I'm sorry. I never stopped loving you. I was lonely and weak, trembling with rage and heartbreak. Elizabeth turned away. The perfect life she'd imagined lay in shards at her feet. She pressed a hand protectively over her baby bump, realizing the full impact of his words. This was no minor indiscretion. It was a betrayal that called everything into question. Tears streamed down her face, but a steely resolve flickered in her eyes. Pack a bag, Damon, she said quietly, because I can't even look at you right now. You need to leave. He rose, desperation in his voice. Liz, please. I can fix this. She shook her head, stepping back. Not tonight. Not here. Go. Damon swallowed hard, tears shining in his eyes as he retreated to the bedroom. Elizabeth sank onto the couch, each breath ragged, mind swirling with shock and anger. She had returned expecting a joyful reunion, only to find her world forever altered by the one person she had trusted above all others. For the first time in their marriage, Damon Carlyle packed an overnight bag with no clue of where he would stay. The doorman regarded him with polite confusion as he exited the penthouse after midnight. Guilt pressed on Damon's chest like a vise. He ended up at a luxury hotel a few blocks away, renting a suite under his name. Alone with his thoughts, he resisted the urge to call Camila or Elizabeth. Every fiber of his being yearned to fix the damage, but he sensed that any immediate attempt would only worsen the storm. Meanwhile, Elizabeth locked herself in the penthouse, tears giving way to furious anger. She paced the living room, occasionally resting a hand on her belly as a reminder to stay calm for the baby's sake. Harriet's words echoed in her mind. If things get complicated, call me. But no call could erase what Damon had done. By morning, she phoned Harriet, voice trembling. The moment Harriet heard the pain in her friend's tone, she offered to fly in. Elizabeth agreed, relief mingling with heartbreak. "I need someone here," she whispered. "I can't face this alone." That same morning, Camila Monroe strolled into Carlisle Innovations as though nothing had happened. She headed for Damon's office, only to find Gina Hall glaring at her from the reception desk. "Mr. Carlisle isn't here," Gina said curtly, eyes cold. "And I doubt he wants visitors." Camilla arched a brow, feigning innocence. "He has urgent business with me." Gina stood. "I think we both know you've caused enough trouble. If you're wise, you'll keep your distance." A flicker of annoyance crossed Camilla's face, but she said nothing more, turning on her heel and departing under the disapproving stares of staff who had heard the rumors. Elsewhere, Damon sat in the hotel suite, phone vibrating with a barrage of missed calls from the office, from board members, from associates. Everyone wanted updates on the city contract, yet Damon's mind was consumed by personal catastrophe. His lawyer even reached out, politely suggesting that any scandal could jeopardize the deal. In the penthouse, Harriet arrived by afternoon, letting herself in with the spare key. Elizabeth had left at the front desk. She found Elizabeth curled on the couch, pale and visibly distressed. Without a word, Harriet rushed over, embracing her friend. Elizabeth's tears flowed freely then, and Harriet murmured soothing words. When the sobs subsided, Harriet guided her to breathe calmly. "You need to take care of yourself and the baby first. Damon, that situation can't overshadow your health." Elizabeth nodded, letting Harriet help her stand. They prepared a simple lunch, though Elizabeth's appetite was nearly non-existent. She recounted Damon's betrayal in broken sentences, Harriet listening intently. "I feel so humiliated," Elizabeth whispered. "How could he do this now, of all times? When I was away, trying to be healthy for our child." Harriet's expression hardened. "There's no excuse, but decide what you need. Do you want him gone for good, or do you think there's anything left to salvage?" Elizabeth's eyes brimmed with tears again. She pictured their wedding day, Damon's vows, the sweet gestures he'd once shown. "I don't know," she admitted brokenly. "All I know is I can't look at him without thinking of that woman." As Harriet guided her to the bedroom to rest, Elizabeth grappled with the swirling questions of her future. Could she raise a child in a broken marriage? Could she trust Damon again? The once stable foundation of their life had cracked wide open, leaving her to decide whether to attempt repairing it or walk away entirely. And somewhere in a luxury hotel suite, Damon stared into the mirror, tormented by the realization that a single series of reckless nights could cost him the woman he truly loved and the family he had always dreamed of. It would take more than apologies to rebuild those shattered bonds if they could ever be repaired at all. Over the next few days, Elizabeth remained secluded in the penthouse under Harriet's care. She kept communication with Damon minimal, insisting she needed time to think. Harriet shielded her from calls and visitors, making sure Elizabeth's stress stayed as low as possible for the baby's sake. The tabloids caught wind of the scandal when an anonymous source leaked that Damon Carlisle had taken extended leave from Carlisle Innovations after a rumored affair. Social media buzzed with speculation, though no official statement emerged from Damon or the company. Camila, for her part, tried to contact Damon repeatedly, sending texts that ranged from apologetic to defensive. He ignored them all. Guilt and shame roiled inside him, overshadowed by a growing desperation to salvage his marriage. When he finally mustered the courage to call Elizabeth, Harriet answered and told him coldly, "She's not ready to speak with you." Damon visited a lawyer to explore how to handle damage control, both personally and for Carlisle Innovations. The lawyer advised him to consider a public apology if the rumors worsened, but recommended focusing on private reconciliation first. Meanwhile, the city contract negotiations stalled, with officials wary of the swirling scandal. On the fifth day, Elizabeth allowed Damon to come to the penthouse under Harriet's watchful eye. He arrived with a bouquet of Elizabeth's favorite roses, a gesture that felt painfully inadequate given the gravity of his betrayal. Harriet let him in, her expression icy. He found Elizabeth sitting in the living room, arms folded over her growing belly. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, but a quiet determination radiated from her. "I'm here to talk, to apologize," Damon began, voice trembling. "I'll do anything to make this right." Elizabeth held his gaze, hurt etched into every line of her face. "Don't say anything unless you mean it," she said quietly, "because what I need isn't just an apology. I need to know why. I need to know if there's any chance I can trust you again." Damon set the flowers aside, sinking to his knees before her. He told her everything, how he felt lonely and overwhelmed without her, how Camilla's relentless charm and their late-night work sessions led to a slow erosion of boundaries. He confessed he had tried to stop, but each time found himself drawn back in by a reckless desire. Elizabeth listened, tears slipping down her cheeks. When he finished, she spoke in a shaky voice. "You destroyed my faith in you at the worst possible time. How could you risk our family for a fleeting thrill?" He bowed his head, tears of his own shining. "I can't defend the indefensible," he whispered. "I was weak, selfish. I can't change what I did, but I promise I will never repeat it. I love you and our child more than anything." She let silence stretch, broken only by Harriet's quiet presence nearby. Finally, Elizabeth took a ragged breath. "If we are to have any future, you must cut all ties with Camila, and I want it in writing. No business, no contact, no excuses." Damon nodded fervently. "Done. I'll sign any agreement you want. I'll have my lawyer draft it. And if you need more time before we can live together again, I'll respect that." Elizabeth's tears flowed anew at his desperation, her own heart torn between love and betrayal. "This won't be forgiven easily," she managed. "I don't know if I can move past it. But for our child's sake, I might try." Relief and sorrow warred on Damon's face. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him hold it tentatively, as though testing the fragile possibility of reconciliation. Harriet stood quietly, observing the raw pain and the flicker of hope. In that moment, Elizabeth realized her journey was far from over. The mistress had seduced her husband while she was away, leaving wounds that would not heal overnight. Yet the child she carried reminded her of the future she once envisioned with Damon. Whether they could still claim that future depended on a slow, difficult rebuilding of trust or a choice to walk away, forging a new life on her own. Only time, honesty, and unwavering commitment could determine if Damon and Elizabeth would ever share the love they once believed to be unbreakable. Thank you for following this tumultuous tale of secrecy, desire, and second chances. From the moment Elizabeth's health concerns sent her overseas, Damon's latent loneliness and ambition collided with Camilla's calculated seduction, lighting a spark that threatened to consume everything he and Elizabeth had built. When Elizabeth returned to uncover the truth, the raw devastation shattered her faith in a marriage she once deemed unshakable. Poor wife walks in on Millionaire proposing to Mistress. What she does next will shock you. When Maria Delgado pushed open the ornate doors to the private dining room, she was expecting a quiet evening with her millionaire husband, Jacob. Instead, she found him kneeling before another woman, an extravagant ring poised between his trembling fingers. In that split second, her world shattered like delicate porcelain dropped from a great height. Emotions warred inside her: shock, betrayal, fury. But what Maria did next defied every expectation. The consequences of that decisive moment would reverberate through high society circles, revealing secret alliances, shattered trust, and a woman's quest to carve her own destiny out of the chaos her husband had unleashed. Maria Delgado had been raised to believe in the power of love. Born in a modest suburb of Philadelphia, she'd spent her childhood studying hard, watching her parents work long hours, and learning the value of perseverance. Love, in her eyes, was meant to be honorable, a sacred promise that transcended time and adversity. So, when she married Jacob Delgado, an unassuming man at the time, who later skyrocketed to wealth, she believed their union was fated. Everything about Jacob back then spoke of ambition tempered by warmth, a thirst for success supported by a deep devotion to her. They married in their mid-20s, beginning with a modest apartment in downtown Philadelphia. While he climbed the rungs of the real estate development world, Maria supported them both by teaching music lessons to neighborhood kids. She beamed with pride each time Jacob closed a deal that brought them a step closer to his dream, building an empire. Through the nascent years of their marriage, every victory was shared. Every setback was consoled by the other. The couple felt invincible. As Jacob's fortunes grew, so did his interests, and the city seemed too small for his evolving ambitions. With the promise of even greater success, he uprooted them to New York. Over time, he transformed from the modest man Maria once knew into someone revered by the upper echelons of Manhattan's elite. He became known for orchestrating multi-million-dollar real estate ventures. Their modest apartment turned into a lavish penthouse overlooking Central Park. From dressing in simple button-down shirts to adorning himself in bespoke suits from Savile Row, Jacob thrived in the glitz and glamour of high society life. Maria was proud of him, of course. But with each acquisition, each expansion, each lavish party thrown by Manhattan's wealthy set, she began to sense something intangible slipping away. The sweet, humble spark in Jacob's eyes was being replaced by a relentless desire for more. Their shared dinners became fewer and fewer. Their conversations, once intimately about dreams and daily life, revolved around boardroom strategies and the constant hum of new deals. Where there was once closeness, an unspoken chasm was opening. Still, Maria was no stranger to sacrifice. She believed that a marriage demanded effort and understanding. She accepted that his time was consumed by meetings, power lunches with foreign investors, and charity galas where he networked. She made space for his blossoming empire and refused to let suspicion take root. If he was distant, she told herself, it was because he was tired. If his phone rang at odd hours, it was because that was how the real estate world worked. She clung to the memory of that earnest young man who held her hand in their first tiny kitchen, dreaming of a brighter future together. But all illusions can shatter. Late one evening, after one of his countless events, Jacob casually mentioned that he wanted to take her to an exclusive restaurant the next night. Belafonte's, perched high above the city with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the sparkling skyline. Maria's heart fluttered. A private dinner just for them, exactly what they needed to revive their bond. She felt a spark of hope that maybe their relationship could rekindle, that the old Jacob would re-emerge, if only for a night. The following day, she dressed with care in a flowing, emerald green gown. She recalled how green was Jacob's favorite color on her, how he'd often say her eyes looked like precious jewels when she wore it. She left their penthouse with trembling excitement, not wanting to arrive too early, but also conscious that the invitation had felt momentous, like something significant was in store. When she reached the restaurant, an attentive maitre d' greeted her by name and led her down a corridor to a discreet, gold-trimmed door. Soft piano music flowed from within. Her heart pounded, imagining a candlelit room just for the two of them. Instead, as the door swung open, she stumbled upon a scene she could never have prepared for. Jacob, down on one knee, proposing to a statuesque blonde woman, his mistress, whose face Maria recognized from hushed rumors at parties and unconfirmed gossip in tabloids. The ring in Jacob's hand sparkled like a fallen star, captured by the overhead chandelier's light. Time froze, capturing her shock, the mistress's gasp, and Jacob's horrified expression in an excruciating tableau. Maria felt dizzy, her sense of reality splintering. Memories of their simple days in Philadelphia flooded her mind. Her hands shook as she clutched the handle of the door for support. She sensed the maître d' quickly slip away, likely to avoid the pending explosion. The look on Jacob's face rapidly morphed from romantic fervor to utter panic. How long has this been going on? Maria finally managed to choke out, voice trembling. The blonde woman, Annalise Winslow, as Maria would later learn, stepped back, her hand protectively covering the ring that Jacob had tried to slip on her finger. She had a deer-in-headlights look, as if she had expected this moment, but not in such a brutal collision of truths. "Maria," Jacob began, rising slowly from his knee, "it's not what it looks like." A pit of molten anger rose in Maria's chest. The anguish burned, pried open by betrayal. She glanced at the ring Jacob was holding. It wasn't a tiny diamond. It was a massive rock, overshadowing the modest ring she herself had worn with pride for years. Everything about this was a sickening confirmation of what she had refused to suspect. She refused to let him see her crumble, her eyes brimming with unshed tears locked onto Jacob's. "For once in your life," she said, voice trembling yet steel-edged, "tell me the truth." Jacob glanced between Maria and Annalise. Shame flickered across his expression, but only for a moment before resolve set in. In a voice that cracked, he said, "I was going to explain it after this. I never wanted you to find out this way." He was trying to speak gently, but Maria found it galling. Here, in a lavish, private dining room that cost more per meal than some people earned in a month, her husband was kneeling before another woman with an engagement ring. Her world felt false, illusions shattered like shards of broken glass. But instead of running, instead of screaming or hurling every insult she could muster, Maria inhaled. She decided then and there that she wouldn't collapse. Not now, not ever. With a composure that surprised even herself, she said, "Fine." She tugged off her wedding band, the simple gold band that had once symbolized their hopeful union. She placed it gently on the nearest table, right next to a silver platter meant for some extravagant dinner. She looked at Annalise, whose cheeks had gone pale. "Congratulations," Maria said icily. "You've caught a big fish. I hope you both choke on it." She turned on her heel, ignoring Jacob's pleas for her to wait. She walked out with her head held high, tears threatening to fall but refusing to let them out until she was out of that stifling, perfumed environment. Little did either of them know, Maria's next actions would set off a chain reaction of hidden truths, corporate betrayals, and unexpected alliances that would ultimately turn the power dynamics of their world on its head. Maria spent the night at a friend's townhouse near Gramercy Park. This friend, Jennifer Robertson, was one of the few people Maria trusted implicitly. Jennifer, a lawyer by profession, had seen far too many wealthy husbands try to con their wives out of rightful settlements. In the warmly lit living room, Maria recounted the horrifying scene. Jennifer listened quietly, her arms folded, eyes flashing indignation at Jacob's betrayal. When Maria finally finished, the tears she had held back since the restaurant began to slide down her cheeks. Jennifer promptly pulled her into a hug. "Maria," she murmured, "this is terrible, but you're not going through it alone. This time, you have to look out for yourself." Maria sniffled, still reeling. "I never thought. All those business trips, all those late nights." Jennifer tightened her grip. "People like Jacob, they think they can have everything. The wife, the mistress, the image of perfection. You don't deserve that." Maria wiped her tears. A cold anger took root in her heart, overshadowing her sorrow. She had sacrificed too much, believed in Jacob too long. Perhaps she'd been naive, but there was no time left for self-pity "What do I do?" she asked, gazing at Jennifer. "I'm not going to just let him throw me away." Jennifer pursed her lips, then reached for her phone. "First, we need to call Patrick Hodges, one of the top divorce attorneys in New York. He'll know exactly what to do. The Delgado empire might have been built by Jacob, but you've stood beside him every step of the way. New York law won't ignore that." For hours into the night, they planned. Jennifer explained the complexities of high-asset divorces, the myriad ways spouses try to hide money. They dissected the financial empire Jacob had built, the real estate ventures, the offshore accounts rumored by some to exist, the charity foundations that he might use as tax shelters. Maria listened, took notes, and found her heartbreak morphing into a dogged determination. If Jacob thought he could so brazenly propose to another woman, he was in for a rude awakening. The next morning, Maria woke from a fitful sleep. She rose, showered, and dressed in a simple black outfit. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes rimmed with sadness, yet also lit by an undercurrent of resolve. She thought about that shocking moment in the restaurant. It had been mere hours since her life was turned inside out, yet it felt like an eternity. An unexpected wave of curiosity washed over her. What kind of woman was Annalise Winslow, beyond the honey-blonde hair and designer gown? How long had Annalise waited in the wings for Jacob to propose? Maria's mind churned with possibilities. Was she manipulated by Jacob's power, or was she the manipulator? Determined to cut through the speculation, Maria decided she wanted facts. She dialed a private investigator's number, someone recommended by Jennifer. A man named Richard Pine, known in certain circles for his thorough, discreet approach. Maria remembered meeting him briefly at a philanthropic event. He'd been introduced to her as the best man to find what's hidden. If there was dirt to be dug up, Richard Pine could unearth it. Within an hour, Maria was sitting in a small, upscale coffee shop near Union Square. Face to face with Richard, he was a sturdy man in his mid-50s, with kind but calculating eyes. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Delgado?" he asked in a measured tone, sipping his espresso. Maria inhaled slowly. "I found my husband proposing to another woman last night," she said, voice unwavering. "I need to know everything about her, her background, her motivations, any skeletons in her closet." Richard set down his cup, making the slightest grimace. "I'm sorry to hear that. Cheating spouses are, unfortunately, too common in my line of work. But let's talk specifics. What do you already know about this woman?" "Her name is Annalise Winslow. I believe she's from Los Angeles originally. She's in her mid-20s, definitely younger than me or Jacob. Rumor has it she used to be a model, or maybe a socialite. I'm not entirely sure." Richard nodded, scribbling notes. "Understood. I'll compile everything I can find. Miss Winslow's finances, connections, travel history, job history, whatever might help. And I assume you also want me to keep an eye on Jacob's dealings?" He lifted an eyebrow knowingly. "Yes," Maria replied firmly. "I have a strong feeling there's more to this than just an affair. I want to know if he's been hiding money or if he's planning to move assets out of the country. Anything that can help me get some measure of justice when we go to court, or even before that." Richard nodded again. "I'll be in touch soon." Maria thanked him and left, feeling that with each step she was moving deeper into a labyrinth where she had to be the one calling the shots. She wasn't merely a scorned wife. She was becoming an orchestrator of her own destiny. By afternoon, Maria knew she could no longer avoid returning to the penthouse. She needed her clothes, her documents, her life. She braced herself for the confrontation that was inevitable. Summoning what courage she had, she took a taxi to the towering building that had once felt like a dream come true. Its gleaming marble lobby now felt foreign. She ascended in the private elevator, her heart pounding, stomach in knots. As she slid the keycard and the doors to the penthouse opened, she heard Jacob's voice carrying down the corridor. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. She recognized the female voice, Annalise. They seemed to be arguing. Maria took a moment to listen. Through the grand foyer, she could make out the two silhouettes in the living area. She heard Annalise's voice, tight with anger. "You said you'd handle this differently. Now everyone's talking about it like some scandal. How do you think this makes me look?" Jacob hissed back. "You think I planned for Maria to walk in? God, Annalise, I'm juggling a million things. The board at Delgado Holdings is going to be furious if this leaks to the press. This was supposed to be discreet." Maria felt a twinge of savage satisfaction hearing the cracks form in their alliance. With her shoulders set, she stepped forward, letting her heels clack on the polished floor. Jacob and Annalise whirled around, identical expressions of shock distorting their features. "Maria," Jacob started, lifting a hand in an entreaty, but Maria's gaze was locked onto Annalise. Up close, the mistress was undeniably striking tall, poised with carefully styled waves of golden hair. Yet Maria noticed a flicker of insecurity behind that controlled exterior. "Good," she thought. "I'm not the only one rattled. I just came to get my things," Maria said plainly. "Then I'll leave, and you two can celebrate your engagement in peace." Annalise's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes narrowed in faint challenge. Jacob stepped forward. "Maria, wait. I think we should talk." She laughed mirthlessly. "Talk? That's what you wanted to do? You were going to propose to her, Jacob. Don't pretend there's any middle ground here. And honestly, what do I have to say to you? Congratulations." Jacob's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is," Maria snapped, her emotions flaring. "You made a choice, a public choice no less. I can't undo that, and I won't be your doormat." Annalise crossed her arms, lips pressed together, as though restraining herself from retorting. Maria caught the fleeting glance she gave Jacob, some mixture of fear and entitlement. It dawned on Maria that Annalise may have feared losing the security Jacob's fortune promised. The scorned wife's presence in the penthouse complicated matters for the mistress, who presumably dreamed of living here in style. "Just take whatever you need," Jacob said after a moment. "We don't need to fight in front of her." Maria's chest constricted, memories of 1,000 shared moments in this home swirling in her mind. But she suppressed the pain and moved calmly to the master bedroom, which was filled with expensive furnishings and the faint scent of the cologne Jacob once gifted her. She methodically packed a suitcase with her clothes and personal items. Her fingertips lingered on a framed photo of them in front of their first store-bought Christmas tree, back in their humble Philadelphia apartment. She set it aside, not wanting to carry something so laden with nostalgia. As she re-entered the living area, she caught a glimpse of Annalise's engagement ring glinting in the afternoon light. Rage flared again, but she forced composure, reminding herself that she had a plan. Once she had everything she needed, she paused at the door, turning back to them. "Jacob," she said, "I've asked Patrick Hodges to represent me. If you want to avoid a scorched earth divorce, I suggest you speak to your attorney." Annalise's eyes flared at the mention of divorce. Possibly it hammered home the reality that Maria wasn't just going to vanish quietly. Jacob's face fell. He tried to speak, but words failed him. In that charged silence, Maria left. She felt hollow, but also strangely empowered. The woman who had walked in on her husband's betrayal mere hours ago was no longer the same, and what awaited her next was a labyrinth of hidden truths. Over the next week, Manhattan buzzed with rumors. The Delgado name had become a fixture of high society galas and philanthropic events. Whispers circulated through penthouse brunches, exclusive clubs, and midnight parties. Jacob Delgado had not only cheated on Maria, but had proposed to his mistress. The gossip columns ate it up. Real estate mogul's secret engagement was the headline in at least one online publication. People debated whether Maria was blindsided or complicit, whether she'd stay or go, and what the mistress was like. In the meantime, Patrick Hodges, the formidable divorce attorney, laid out a roadmap for Maria. They met in his sleek midtown office, with Jennifer present as moral support. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the hustle and bustle of Manhattan below, as though showing a world that never slept, never paused for heartbreak. "Maria," Patrick said in a calm, almost fatherly tone, "Jacob's net worth is estimated at around $700 million. We need to act fast to ensure he doesn't move assets out of reach." $700 million, Maria echoed, stunned, though she knew the figure hovered in that range. She had watched his success balloon over the years, but to hear it stated so plainly shook her. She'd never placed a dollar value on their relationship. Patrick continued, "We'll file motions to freeze a significant portion of his assets until the court rules on equitable distribution. But be ready, his legal team will fight. Also, the prenuptial agreement. We need to see if that holds up in court." Maria's brow furrowed. "We had a prenup, but it was signed before his empire expanded like this. Back then, he had almost nothing. I never thought it would come to this." Patrick flipped through documents. "Yes, it's from 15 years ago, but we have grounds to challenge it if certain conditions have changed significantly, or if you can prove undue influence or anything along those lines. After all, you supported him morally and even financially in the early years." Jennifer chimed in, "Don't forget about the potential hidden offshore accounts. Rumors are swirling that he might be moving investments to the Cayman Islands." Maria felt her insides twist. Every layer of betrayal deepened her resolve. "Let's do whatever it takes. I don't want to be cruel. I just want what's fair. But if Jacob tries to shortchange me after all I've done to help him, then I'm ready to fight." Patrick gave a firm nod. "I'll coordinate with your investigator, Richard Pine. We'll uncover any hidden income streams or suspicious accounts. In the meantime, you need to remain calm. These next few weeks will be a roller coaster." Maria exhaled. She glanced at Jennifer, who squeezed her hand. This was war, and she was prepared. Late one night, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She tapped it open and saw, "I have information about Annalise. Meet me at Calderwood Cafe, 9 am tomorrow. R.P. Richard Pine." She felt a rush of anticipation. The next morning she arrived at the cozy Calderwood Cafe, known for its artisanal pastries and discreet atmosphere. Richard sat at a corner table, leafing through a manila folder. Maria slid into the chair opposite him. "So, what have you found?" Richard leaned forward, voice low. "Quite a bit, actually. Annalise Winslow is from Los Angeles. That much is true. She started off as a pageant contestant in her teens, then moved into small-time modeling gigs, mostly promotional events. After that, she tried to break into Hollywood. She had a few minor roles, nothing significant." Maria listened intently as Richard continued. "She married briefly at 19 to a man named Parker Bloom, an older talent manager. The marriage lasted less than a year, and she walked away with a sizable alimony settlement, allegations of emotional abuse from both sides, but nothing proven. After that, she moved to New York around 3 years ago. She's been living in high-end apartments, though it's unclear how she's been affording them." "So she's a gold digger," Maria muttered, disgust curling in her stomach. Richard shrugged. "She's adept at finding wealthy men, that much is clear. And from phone records I accessed, it seems she was seeing Jacob for at least a year before you caught them." Maria's chest clenched. A year. She felt her hands tremble momentarily. For a year, her husband had been living a double life. "Go on," she prompted, forcing composure. Her finances are shaky. She maintains appearances, but she's leveraged with credit card debt, living off gifts from older boyfriends. I also found something else, some suspicion that she was previously connected to a money laundering scheme, though nothing concrete enough for an arrest. She's cunning. She knows how to navigate the wealthy circles and keep her secrets hidden. Maria's mind spun. She pictured Annalise draped on Jacob's arm, whispering sweet words to him while systematically securing her future with his money. This was no mere fling. This was a calculated move by an opportunist. It didn't absolve Jacob. He was equally to blame, a grown man who should have seen the red flags. But it changed how Maria viewed the dynamic. "How can I use this information?" she asked. Richard folded his hands. "Your legal team can introduce this as evidence that Annalise might be pushing Jacob to move assets, or that she might have a questionable background that affects the case. While it doesn't directly influence your divorce settlement, it can shed light on Jacob's credibility and motives." Maria nodded slowly. "Thank you, Richard. This is incredibly helpful." She closed the folder, feeling her spirits lift for a moment. This was more than just heartbreak. Now it was a mission to protect herself from two cunning players. She had let love blind her to Jacob's changes, but she would not let it blind her to her own future. While the divorce proceedings were set in motion, Jacob Delgado faced a crisis of his own. The Delgado Holdings Board of Directors had caught wind of the scandal. The reason? A major investor, KG Nakamura, who had planned to pour hundreds of millions into Delgado Holdings' new project, was now hesitant. The fiasco with Jacob's personal life signaled instability at the helm, and big money despises instability. A week later, in the elegant conference room at Delgado Holdings headquarters, Jacob was grilled by the board. The walls were lined with modern art, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. But the tension inside was palpable. Men and women in suits, representing some of the largest financial institutions, demanded answers. Board member Regina Charles, a tough-as-nails executive with silver-streaked hair, eyed Jacob coldly. "We're not here to judge your personal decisions," she began, "but your behavior is affecting our business." Mr. Nakamura is spooked. He stalled negotiations because he doesn't like the negative press associated with your, shall we say, public affair. Jacob attempted a confident posture. "We can handle this," he said. "Nakamura's concerns are about the stability of the company. I can assure you Delgado Holdings is stronger than ever." Regina's sharp gaze didn't waver. "Your wife, Maria Delgado, has been a visible figure at charitable events linked to this company. She was involved, albeit unofficially, in several philanthropic partnerships. Her departure in such a scandalous way raises questions. We need to ensure no crisis of confidence escalates." Jacob felt his insides tighten. The narrative was twisting. Maria was no longer just his wife. She was an extension of the brand he had built. He stifled the desire to lash out at the board's insinuation that his personal life was fair game. "Instead," he insisted, "I'm working on controlling the narrative. We'll handle the press. And as for Maria, once the divorce is settled, we can present a unified, amicable front." Regina's lips formed a thin line. "Jacob, we hired a PR team. They've strongly advised that we do damage control before the next shareholders' meeting. That might involve statements from both you and Maria, something to quell rumors of a messy divorce that could sabotage investor confidence. Besides, have you considered the ramifications if Miss Delgado takes you to the cleaners financially?" Jacob's frustration peaked. "I have attorneys for that," he snapped. "We'll handle it." The rest of the board members exchanged looks. One of them, Arnold Powell, tried to lighten the tone. "Look, we just need reassurance that Delgado Holdings won't implode from a personal scandal." If you can't get it under control, we might have to explore leadership changes. That was the ultimate threat, a coup at his own company. Jacob forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. There will be no need for that. Trust me. As the meeting adjourned, Jacob was left alone for a moment. His reflection in the glossy surface of the boardroom table looked older, more stressed. He thought of Maria's eyes the last time he saw her, brimming with betrayal. Then he thought of Annalise, upset with the negative attention. For the first time, he questioned if the precarious web he'd spun was worth the cost. But it was too late. The avalanche had already begun. In a twist that neither Maria nor Jacob could have predicted, help came from an unexpected quarter, Jacob's estranged sister, Daniela Delgado. She had parted ways with the family years earlier, after disagreeing with Jacob on a major business decision that led to a bitter falling out. Since then, Daniela had built her own path, creating a successful interior design firm. She'd always admired Maria's kindness from afar and held contempt for Jacob's ruthless ambition. Out of the blue, Daniela reached out to Maria. She called one evening while Maria was reviewing documents with Jennifer. "Maria, this is Daniela, Jacob's sister." Maria's initial shock shifted into curiosity. "Yes, Daniela. The first remember you. We haven't spoken in ages." "Look," Daniela said, "I heard about what happened. I don't blame you if you don't want to talk. But I have information about a couple of major real estate deals. Jacob's been working on things that might be relevant to your divorce. If you're interested, meet me at the Silverwood Lounge tomorrow night at 8. Maria hesitated. Jacob had mentioned Daniela only rarely, and it was always laced with bitterness. Yet something told her Daniela might be sincere. "I'll be there," she said, surprising even herself. The next night, Maria walked into the Silverwood Lounge, a chic bar with velvet drapes and soft jazz music. Daniela, a petite woman with sharp features, waved from a corner booth. She wore a stylish black suit and maintained a guarded expression. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniela said, offering a polite nod as Maria sat down. Maria studied Jacob's sister. "I'm surprised you reached out. Jacob never said good things about you." Daniela smirked. "Likewise. He painted you as the obedient wife who turned a blind eye to his shadier deals. But I knew that wasn't you. We might not have been close, but I always saw your kindness." Now, about his real estate dealings. She opened her handbag and pulled out a USB drive. These are documents that point to a series of shell companies linked to Delgado Holdings. I suspect he's been funneling money offshore. Years back, he tried to get me to help launder funds through interior design contracts. I refused, and that's partly why we fell out. He threatened me to keep quiet. Maria's eyes widened. She carefully took the USB drive. If these documents were legitimate, they could be a game changer. "Why help me now?" Daniela's eyes flickered with something akin to regret. "Because Jacob's arrogance has gone too far. He's forgotten family loyalty and moral boundaries. If he wants to destroy you, the one decent aspect of his life, I won't stand for it. And, to be transparent, I want him to face consequences for all the times he's bullied and blackmailed anyone who stood in his way." Maria tucked the USB drive into her purse. She studied Daniela carefully, trying to gauge sincerity. "Thank you," she said eventually. "I'll have my lawyer look at this. I appreciate your honesty." Daniela gave a single nod. "Just be careful. He'll retaliate if he feels cornered. Jacob Delgado is still my brother, and I know what he's capable of." Fear nudged at Maria's heart, but it was overshadowed by her determination. She swore to herself that she wouldn't let fear rule her anymore. Jacob had shattered her trust and flaunted his betrayal in a way that threatened her entire future. She wouldn't stand idly by. While Maria gathered information, Annalise Winslow was not idle. She realized Jacob was in a precarious position. The negative press, the board's dissatisfaction, and now the looming divorce threatened to erode the luxurious future she had counted on. In whispered phone calls, she pressed Jacob to finalize their engagement, to secure her name in the Delgado fortune before it slipped away. Yet Jacob delayed, promising to fix everything first. Uncertain of Jacob's ability to protect her interests, Annalise took matters into her own hands. She arranged a private lunch with one of Jacob's longtime associates, a banker named Charles Montclair. He was known to handle offshore transactions for Delgado Holdings. At a chic bistro on the Upper East Side, she met Charles in a secluded corner. "Jacob trusts you, right?" she asked, swirling her wineglass. She wore a designer dress, exuding confidence, even though her heart pounded with nerves. Charles nodded slowly. "We've done business together for years." Annalise leaned forward, letting her voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. "Good, because I want to guarantee that if things go south, I'm protected." Charles raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order." Jacob keeps his financial dealings close to the vest. A sly smile tugged at Annalise's lips. "I'm sure he does. But I also know Delgado Holdings is possibly moving money in ways that aren't entirely above board. If you help me get a piece of the pie quietly, I'll make it worth your while. I have connections in L.A. that might interest you." Charles swallowed. He was no stranger to morally dubious requests, but this was bolder than most. Still, money talked. "What do you propose?" "I propose you set me up with an offshore account. A small percentage of whatever Jacob moves. I don't care if it's 1 million or 10 million, as long as I have something to fall back on. In return, I'll keep my mouth shut if the authorities come knocking." Charles looked uneasy. He glanced around to ensure no one was listening. This could be risky. "But I'll see what I can do." Annalise nodded, leaning back with a smug satisfaction. She felt a thrill at the prospect of securing her own fortune. She was tired of waiting for Jacob to deliver. If he was going to let his empire crumble, she'd salvage what she could. The divorce proceedings accelerated. Under the scrutiny of Patrick Hodges, Jacob's lawyers tried every trick in the book. They argued that the prenuptial agreement limited Maria's entitlement to a fraction of the current fortune. But Patrick introduced evidence that Maria's early support had directly facilitated Jacob's meteoric rise. Financial experts testified about intangible contributions, spousal support, and the validity of a prenup signed under potentially misleading circumstances. Behind closed doors, settlement negotiations were intense. One afternoon, in a wood-paneled conference room in the courthouse, Maria and Jacob faced each other while their lawyers sparred over details. The tension was suffocating. Jacob's lead attorney, Garrett Rhodes, glared over his wire-rimmed glasses. "My client is offering a significant settlement, $20 million. That's more than generous, given the prenuptial agreement." Maria's lawyer, Patrick, shot back. $20 million is a pittance compared to the Delgado empire. "My client deserves equitable distribution, especially in light of the new evidence we'll be presenting about hidden assets." Garrett stiffened. "What evidence?" Patrick laid out the file containing Daniela's USB drive findings, shell companies, suspicious transfers, and potential tax evasion. Maria noticed Jacob's face flush with anger. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. "If you don't want the courts delving into these matters," Patrick said calmly, "it would be wise to offer a fair settlement and quickly." Garrett looked to Jacob, who cleared his throat. "This is ridiculous," Jacob muttered. "Maria, we can handle this privately. Let's not blow up everything we built." Maria's anger flared. "We didn't build anything together anymore, Jacob. You destroyed that. I just want what I'm legally entitled to, nothing less." Before Jacob could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, features hardening. "Excuse me," he said, rising and stepping outside. Maria exchanged a look with her lawyer, who gave her a reassuring nod. She felt a pang in her chest, remembering the man she once loved. But she'd come too far to yield. Moments later, Jacob returned, face grim. "There's a situation at Delgado Holdings. I need to attend to it. We'll resume this later." He left with Garrett, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. Patrick exhaled and turned to Maria. "He's rattled. That's good. But we need to keep the pressure on." She nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. Jacob had always thrived under pressure, but this was a new realm of stress, public scandal, board dissatisfaction, a vengeful sister revealing his secrets, a cunning mistress, and a betrayed wife fighting back. If anyone understood the Empire's vulnerability, it was Maria, and now she had no reason to protect it. Jacob discovered what the phone call was about. Keiji Nakamura had officially withdrawn his large investment due to the ongoing negative publicity and internal instability at Delgado Holdings. The blow was catastrophic. Stocks dipped, the board was livid, rumors of a hostile takeover circulated. Jacob's once iron grip on his empire was loosening. In the days that followed, tabloids feasted on fresh gossip. Leaked whispers suggested that Jacob's mistress was demanding a rush wedding and that the Delgado board was considering a forced resignation if the crisis continued. Jacob's face, once glowing with ambition, now appeared haggard. The carefully curated facade of success was crumbling faster than he could salvage it. At Annalise's insistence, Jacob tried to offer her a lavish ceremony in some exotic locale, hoping a quick marriage might quell some rumors and secure her unwavering support. But the board frowned at any attempt that would further sensationalize his personal life. An internal power struggle erupted, with some directors pressuring Jacob to step down temporarily. Regina Charles especially had sharpened her stance, aligning with a faction that believed Delgado Holdings needed a new figurehead to reassure investors. In a desperate bid to maintain control, Jacob made a public statement. Cameras flashed as he stepped before a cluster of reporters outside the Delgado Holdings headquarters. He wore a dark suit, face set in an expression of forced calm. "I would like to address recent speculations regarding my personal life," he began, voice subdued. "I am currently going through a divorce process, and I request privacy and respect during this challenging time. Delgado Holdings remains strong, and we are fully committed to our ongoing projects. The unfortunate withdrawal of Mr. Nakamura's investment does not diminish our stability." He continued with corporate platitudes, but the reporters clamored for more personal answers. "What about the mistress? Are you engaged already?" one asked. Jacob ignored it, reading from his carefully prepared statement. But the damage was done. In the public's eye, he was the faithless millionaire with something to hide. Watching the coverage from Jennifer's townhouse, Maria felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She had loved that man once. Now he was a stranger, fighting to keep illusions intact. But illusions always come at a price. She reminded herself of that truth. As the divorce hearing approached, tension reached a fever pitch. Patrick Hodges received a call from Garrett Rhodes, requesting a private meeting, just the lawyers and their clients, with no media or court officials. Maria and Jennifer drove to the law firm's office, hearts pounding. They were ushered into a sleek conference room. Jacob, Garrett, Patrick, and a stone-faced Annalise were already seated around a polished table. Maria ignored the pang of seeing Annalise by Jacob's side. She focused on the fact that the mistress's presence was highly unusual in a divorce negotiation. Garrett cleared his throat. "We've come with a proposition, Mr. Delgado is prepared to offer a settlement of $100 million plus the Manhattan penthouse in exchange for Miss Delgado signing a non-disclosure agreement, no further revelations about Delgado Holdings or Mr. Delgado's personal affairs. We want to handle this quietly and move on." Maria's eyes flickered. 100 million was vastly larger than the initial offer. She glanced at Patrick, who gave a subtle nod, indicating it was a substantial proposition. Yet something felt off. Her gaze slid to Annalise, who looked uncharacteristically tense. Patrick spoke up. "It's a generous offer, but we need to verify if there are no further conditions. Also, the NDA's scope must be clarified. Miss Delgado has the right to discuss her personal experiences freely." Jacob cut in, voice sharp. "I don't want my ex-wife airing dirty laundry. We sign this. We end it. Maria, you go your way, I go mine." Maria's heart raced. 100 million could secure her future, free her from the stress, and let her start anew. It was a fortune beyond her wildest imagination back when they were newlyweds sharing cheap takeout. But then her gaze settled on Annalise, who avoided eye contact. Maria recalled the shady deals and the knowledge that Delgado Holdings was unraveling behind the scenes. She realized that if she accepted the offer blindly, she might be stepping into a trap, allowing Jacob to cover up potential crimes and injustice. She licked her lips, choosing her words carefully. "Jacob, I appreciate the offer, but I won't sign anything until I'm sure you're not hiding more. I don't need your hush money if it means letting you and Annalise ruin more lives." Anger flashed in Jacob's eyes. "You're letting bitterness cloud your judgment. Think of what 100 million can do for you." Annalise finally spoke, voice hesitant. "Maria, please. There's no need to drag this out. We can all walk away with dignity." Maria almost laughed at the irony of Annalise talking about dignity. Instead, she closed her eyes, remembering the heartbreak of that night at Belafonte's. Then she thought of the fear and manipulation that might still lurk if she let Jacob walk away scot-free. "I'll consider it," she said, "but I'm not making a decision today." Garrett, Jacob's lawyer, looked frustrated. "We need an answer soon. Otherwise, we proceed to court." "Then we proceed to court," Patrick replied calmly. "We'll see you there." The tension was palpable as they stood to leave. Jacob locked eyes with Maria. "Don't do this," he said softly, an echo of the old Jacob appearing for a split second. "We can solve this quietly." She met his gaze, seeing the man she once loved drowned out by layers of betrayal. "If you had wanted things quiet, you wouldn't have proposed to your mistress in a public place." The day of the official court hearing dawned cloudy and brisk. Photographers and reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Maria arrived with Patrick, Jennifer, and a small security detail. Whispers followed her. She was no longer just a betrayed wife, she was the woman who might topple a millionaire's empire. Rumors swirled that she possessed damning evidence of fraud. Jacob and Annalise arrived separately, escorted by their own legal team. People craned their necks to catch a glimpse, cameras clicking furiously. He looked tense, shoulders stiff under his tailored suit. Annalise kept her chin high, though she lingered behind Jacob, as if wary of the scrutiny. Inside the large, wood-panelled courtroom, the judge, a stern woman named Honorable Denise Faraday, called the session to order. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. On the surface, it was a high-profile divorce, but in reality, it was a battleground for corporate secrets, personal vengeance, and heartbreak. Patrick presented Maria's case with meticulous detail, her contributions to Jacob's early success, the suspicious financial maneuvers uncovered by Daniela and Richard Pine, and the emotional distress caused by Jacob's public betrayal. Garrett rebutted by citing the prenup, painting Maria as vengeful, seeking more than she deserved. Midway through the proceedings, Patrick introduced a surprise witness, Daniela Delgado. She stepped forward, looking poised and determined. Her testimony about Jacob's shell companies, backed by email chains and financial documents, sent waves of shock through the courtroom. The tension climbed higher when she revealed that she had confronted Jacob years ago about money laundering allegations, which he had vehemently denied. When cross-examined by Garrett, Daniela stayed firm. "I have no reason to lie," she said quietly, "other than to expose wrongdoing. My brother has threatened me, but I won't be silent anymore." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jacob's face was a mask of barely contained fury. For Maria, hearing Daniela stand up for the truth was both validating and heartbreaking. This was the family she once thought she had. Then it was Annalise's turn on the stand. She was visibly nervous, glancing repeatedly at Jacob for reassurance. Under Patrick's probing questions, she admitted to the affair, to Jacob's promises of marriage, but denied any knowledge of financial misconduct. She played the part of the innocent lover, insisting she merely fell in love with a man who claimed he was divorcing his wife. Patrick pressed, "Did Mr. Delgado ever mention, even indirectly, wanting to shift funds out of the country, presumably to protect them from the plaintiff?" Annalise hesitated, swallowing hard. "Not in so many words," she finally said. He mentioned wanting to make sure his money was secure." That small admission sent a ripple through the courtroom. Jacob's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. By the time Annalise stepped down, sweat dotted her brow. She cast a fleeting glance at Jacob, who looked away. After a tense lunch recess, the court reconvened. Garrett strode to the center, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Your Honor, we have newly obtained evidence regarding Miss Delgado's own financial history, specifically questionable transactions in her name that raise concerns about her credibility." A hush descended. Maria's heart skipped. She had no idea what they were referring to. She quickly glanced at Patrick, who looked equally puzzled. Jennifer furrowed her brow. Could Jacob's legal team have found something contrived to discredit Maria? Garrett projected documents onto a screen. They showed wire transfers from an account titled M. Delgado to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The amounts were substantial, several $1 million. Maria was dumbfounded. She had never seen those transactions. "This is absurd," Patrick hissed. "Miss Delgado has no knowledge of these accounts. They must be fabricated," but Garrett pressed on. "Nevertheless, these documents indicate that Miss Delgado might have known about offshore practices and even participated in them. We must question her integrity and motivations." Maria's stomach churned. She realized this was a smear tactic, orchestrated to paint her as complicit or hypocritical. But how had they manufactured these records? The judge frowned, calling for order. "Miss Delgado," she addressed Maria, "do you have any knowledge of these transactions?" Maria stood, voice trembling but resolute. "None whatsoever, Your Honor. This is the first I've seen of these so-called documents. I suspect they're part of a scheme by Mr. Delgado to undermine my case." Jacob's eyes flicked toward her. Was there a flicker of regret, or just determination to win at any cost? The judge instructed further examination of the evidence, and recess was called for the day. The media outside went wild, speculating on whether Maria was truly innocent or had skeletons in her closet. That evening, as Maria regrouped with her team, she tried to steady her nerves. Jennifer cursed Jacob's low blow. Patrick immediately launched an investigation into the suspicious documents, suspecting they were forged or manipulated. Meanwhile, Maria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard Pine. "Meet me at my office tomorrow at 7 a.m. I might have found something that can flip this around." Tension thrummed within her. She realized that she was dancing on the edge of a high-stakes game, one where illusions could be crafted and destroyed in an instant. She also sensed that if she didn't play her cards right, she could lose everything. The next morning, Maria arrived at Richard Pine's unremarkable office building in Chelsea. In a modest but tidy workspace, he greeted her with a firm handshake. On his desk, he had a laptop open to a complicated spreadsheet of IP addresses and account details. "I suspected those documents introduced in court were forged," he began without preamble. "So I did a deep dive into the digital metadata of the wire transfers. Every time a wire transfer is done, there's an electronic fingerprint. Long story short, the documents we saw in court have anomalies that suggest they were fabricated." Maria felt a surge of relief but also anger at Jacob's treachery. "So it's definitely fake," Richard nodded. "Yes, and I have proof. The IP addresses associated with these transactions trace back to a shell company that's linked to Delgado Holdings. The digital watermark indicates the documents were created using a specific software license registered to that same shell company. In simpler terms, it was an inside job." Maria exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. She wanted to hug Richard, but she settled for gripping his arm. "This is exactly what we need. With this, we can prove they tried to frame me." Richard offered a faint smile. "Be careful. Jacob's cornered, and cornered people can be unpredictable. But yes, this should be enough to dismantle their smear campaign." Armed with this new evidence, Maria returned to the courthouse. Patrick introduced Richard Pine's findings, systematically debunking the false documents. The judge was furious at the apparent attempt to mislead the court. Garrett stammered that they'd obtained the documents from an anonymous source and had no knowledge of the forgery. Jacob looked livid, glancing at Annalise, who stared at the floor. The judge sternly reminded all parties that perjury and tampering with evidence carried severe consequences. In a decisive moment, she ordered a full forensic audit of Delgado Holdings' accounts. That spelled disaster for Jacob, who had spent years carefully disguising questionable dealings. It was the final straw that cracked his empire's shell wide open. When the courtroom resumed, Maria's legal team presented ironclad evidence that the so-called Cayman Islands bank statements in her name were forged. Metadata traced them back to a shell company tied to Delgado Holdings, proving Jacob's team had fabricated documents to discredit her. Furious at the deception, the judge ordered a comprehensive forensic audit of all Delgado Holdings accounts. Within days, the company's stock nosedived as investors panicked, and board members blamed Jacob for the ensuing scandal. Facing mounting pressure, they forced him to step down as CEO, leaving him humiliated and struggling to salvage his reputation. Simultaneously, Maria's divorce proceedings reached a turning point. Recognizing he was cornered by the damning audit and under threat of a potential criminal investigation, Jacob instructed his lawyer to extend a vastly improved settlement offer. Instead of the nominal amounts initially proposed, Maria now stood to receive $200 million, a portfolio of properties including the Manhattan penthouse, and an official acknowledgement of Jacob's wrongdoing. Crucially, the settlement would also include his public apology for using forged evidence against her. Desperate to minimize further legal liabilities and public shame, Jacob surrendered to every condition, though he seethed at the outcome. On the day the final documents were signed, Jacob approached Maria in the courthouse hallway, offering a halting apology that acknowledged his betrayal and, beneath that, his regret at how spectacularly he had destroyed their shared dreams. Maria accepted his words without malice, though the bond they'd once shared was irrevocably severed. Annalise Winslow did not appear. Rumors suggested she was already planning her exit, unwilling to remain at Jacob's side now that his empire was in shambles. With the divorce finalized, Maria stepped away from the chaos. Though she walked away with more money than she'd ever imagined, she remained grounded by the values her parents had instilled in her. Resolving to use her resources for good, she founded an organization to assist women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, separation, or financial struggles. Daniela, Jacob's sister, became a staunch supporter. Together, they furnished the charity's new office, forging a friendship born of mutual respect rather than shared loyalty to Jacob. Jacob's fall from grace served as a cautionary tale in Manhattan's elite circles, a parable of unchecked ambition leading to ruin. Free from his shadow, Maria embraced her next chapter on her own terms, moving into a modern penthouse across town, a space she chose herself. Not out of obligation, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Gazing at the skyline one late afternoon, she allowed the crisp air to fill her lungs, contemplating the journey that had challenged her faith in love and trust. Yet, in rising from the rubble, Maria discovered a powerful truth. Broken dreams could serve as the foundation for a more genuine, self-determined future. In the end, she transformed a devastating betrayal into an unbreakable will, resolved to live fully and authentically. Her story an enduring testament to resilience and renewal. And there you have it, the twists and turns of Maria Delgado's remarkable journey from unsuspecting wife to triumphant phoenix. She discovered the power of self-reinvention in the face of heartbreak and high-stakes drama, proving that even the deepest betrayals can ignite a fierce determination to rise. Jacob Delgado's downfall and Annalise Winslow's vanishing act became cautionary tales whispered throughout Manhattan's elite circles, while Maria's name was etched into the city's lore as a resilient survivor who refused to back down. She built a new life that honored her past but never allowed it to define her future.